upstate New York, Rochester region, upstate New York. But after my freshman year at Cornell, I had a 2 handicap. Those of you who play golf know that's pretty good golf. I was number 1 on the team. My grade point average, however, was 1.9. I think you know what that means too. So I gave up golf entirely. I quit cold turkey and focused on my studies. I ended up not designing golf courses, but majoring in English and got a degree in teaching English. And I tried teaching, after my senior year in college, and almost had a nervous breakdown. I think it's the hardest thing I ever did in my life, was walking into a room full of high school students and trying to teach them about literature. So I quickly realized I'm not cut out for this, and I like to write, so I got into journalism. I went to work for a small newspaper in upstate New York, and then, as I said, I married this woman who I'd met in Seneca Falls, Ellen Foote, and we moved to New York City, where I worked for small newspapers for a while. And I know this sounds a little personal, but believe me, it's pertinent. Ellen and I, once we got to New York City, we'd been married about 4 years, and we kind of drifted apart. I think it was like small town kids in the big city and the bright lights. So we got divorced, and about that time, I got a job, my big break in the newspaper business, got a job with the Associated Press in Newark, New Jersey. And when you work for AP, there are a lot of possibilities. AP has bureaus all over the world. And so I had just gotten divorced and was feeling, like kind of crazy. And I'm working for AP. I think I missed the Vietnam War because of the lottery. I think I'd like to cover a war. And so I started studying Arabic and let it be known that I wanted to go to the Middle East. You can do that if you work for AP. And what I learned very quickly was there aren't too many guys who want to go to the Middle East and cover wars. So a year after I raised my hand and said I wanted to go to Beirut, I landed in Beirut as the Middle East correspondent for AP. That was March of 1979. And within a few months I was in Iran because the Shah had been overthrown by Ayatollah Khomeini. I was there when the hostages were taken, and eventually I got thrown out of Iran. I went back into Iran a few months later with the Iraqi army when they invaded Iran. I covered that war from the Iraqi side. Also, I began to miss my ex-wife. So I started writing to her, and she wrote back to me, and eventually I invited her to come to Beirut to visit me. And when she came, it was quiet. There was no fighting in the city, and it's a remarkable country. It's a beautiful country. And we had an amazing couple of weeks. I took her up to the mountains, to the trout restaurants, and over the mountains to Damascus, and we went to Cyprus, island in the Mediterranean, and eventually we decided, okay, let's try this again. And so we ended up getting remarried in Beirut, which I don't recommend. I have to say Beirut is one of the most corrupt places on earth. You can buy anything in Beirut. You can buy an American passport, a New York State driver's license. You can buy machine guns, anti-aircraft weapons, plastic explosives, anything except a marriage license. All the marriages are by the churches in Lebanon, and they're strictly by the book. And believe me, that's the only thing in Beirut that's strictly by the book. So it took us quite a while to get the documentation together to get remarried. We had to have letters from our ministers confirming we were both Presbyterian. We were married by a Presbyterian minister in Lebanon. And then we had our first child in Beirut in the middle of the war. And that became very difficult. I mean, it was one thing for Ellen and I to be there, of our own volition. But once you had a baby, and the possibility of something happening to the baby was just terrifying. So we moved to Cairo, to Egypt. And I went back to Beirut then whenever there was big trouble there. And actually there's a friend of mine from Beirut here today, Madeline Anderson, Terry Anderson's wife. When I left Beirut, Terry Anderson came to Beirut in my spot, and of course, you know what happened to Terry. Amazingly, Terry is from this part of Ohio too, so I don't know, it must be something in the water down here that attracts people to wild places like that. So I got to Cairo, and I was there just in time. I was sitting behind President Sadat when he was assassinated at the parade there in 1981. Had a lot of exciting stories in the Middle East. In 1980 in South Lebanon, I was kidnapped, abducted by a militia group, along with a UN patrol, Irish UN peacekeepers. And it was a very nasty incident. They tortured and killed two of the guys with me, and tortured a third guy, shot him 3 times. I carried him out, and he lived. It turned out it was a vendetta between this militia and the Irish battalion of the UN, because there had been a clash with the militia, and a militiaman had been killed. So these guys wanted revenge. They wanted 2 dead Irishmen as revenge, and that's what they got. So we had our second child in, and believe me, I'm going to get to the beer in Brooklyn. We had our second child in Cairo, daughter Lily, and then AP, liked the work I did in hard, difficult situations. So they wanted me to go to the Philippines because President Marcos was in trouble. And my wife, Ellen, who I had married twice now, said, I'm not going to the Philippines. I'm taking these babies home, and I hope you join us, but if not, have a nice life. And it wasn't such a hard decision. I mean, I decided to stick with my family and come back to the States. But I did turn my back on what was a very exciting career. It's sort of a job for young men, though, and young women. It's not something, the people who do that for a long time tend to end up with some pretty bad personal habits, and their personal lives tend to be kind of a mess, as Madeline, I'm sure, will attest. So while I was there in the Middle East, in Cairo, I met these diplomats at the American Embassy, and they had been posted in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is one of the few countries in the Middle East where alcoholic beverages are banned. If you can imagine working in the oil fields all day and not being able to come home and have a beer. So these guys were all home brewers. And actually there's a very active homebrew community among the expats in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and some of the other countries where they have Islamic law and ban alcoholic beverages. So I got into drinking the homebrew these guys were making, and